Okay, folks, Mike Messier, pro wrestling fan. Now, this is deep into the weeds for pro wrestling fans. If you're here on the Mike Messier YouTube channel, if you're not a pro wrestling fan, might I recommend watching something else on my channel? Suicide Girls Burlesque, my original films, The Impeccable, Blood Sugar Sedase, Messier Mantra. Now, let's get back to the wrestling fans. It's kind of a serious and a hard topic to discuss, but I'm going to do my best. Basically, this is a weird situation, unfortunate situation, on top of a bigger, more horrible, sad news. The wrestler known as Brody Lee, formerly known as Luke Harper, passed away just a couple of days ago. I believe it was December 26th. I could be wrong. I believe it was the day after Christmas, and one of the things that followed was a bit of controversy that's still going on, I guess. Some people know this guy, some people don't. Bruce Mitchell, a gentleman from North Carolina who most recently, for just a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, but not much more than that, maybe just a week, has been doing a daily wrestling update on ad-free shows, Conrad Thompson's pay channel, pay website platform, an app, if you would. So Bruce has gotten a little bit more name recognition from that, but beyond that, he's written for the Pro Wrestling Torch, I believe, for 30 years. I'm Facebook friends with Bruce. We've exchanged pleasantries in the past, but I do remember when it came up between me and Bruce that I had been on the Vince Russo podcast as a guest, and I was friendly with Vince Russo. Bruce Mitchell got very offended, and I didn't quite understand that at the time, but doing more research, I guess Bruce Mitchell, among others, has been a big critic of Vince Russo, not just his wrestling writing, but it veers off into the personal at times, it seems. I could be wrong. But Bruce, an educated fellow, but he got himself into a bit of heat and has now lost his job from the Pro Wrestling Torch. And I'm not sure who the gentleman is that would fire Bruce. To be honest, I thought Bruce ran the thing himself, but I guess I was wrong again. You know, I don't obsess about this stuff. I'm a fan, not a fanatic, although at times, like everyone else with pro wrestling, or it could be heavy metal music, could be cinema, could be football. Sometimes we all can go into the world of fanaticism, let's be honest. And in this situation, Bruce, might have put his metaphorical foot in his mouth, because in an article, I guess it was online, I don't think it was in print, he was reporting on the death of the wrestler known as Brody Lee, and seemingly crossed the line into speculation. Now, this is where, if Bruce were here with me, he might argue this. He might say that he wasn't speculating, or if he was speculating, that he made it clear it was speculation. I would allow Bruce to answer that himself. Of course, he put out a tweet or some type of online thing, social media thing, that this is the last time I'm going to comment about this. So I'm sure Bruce has been hearing it from all sides. Look, I don't think Bruce Mitchell at his heart is a bad guy. I don't know that to be a fact. I've never met the man in person. But from the people that we know in common, namely John Hitchcock, the legendary pro wrestling historian who I've interviewed right here on the Mike Messier YouTube channel, he spoke very well of Bruce as a person. So I don't think Bruce Mitchell in his heart is a bad person. I'm guessing that some people probably do, based on what he said or speculated or wrote about this unfortunate, god-awful death of a young man, 41 years old. Here's what I think. I'm going to speculate. This is my speculation. I think Bruce, and I'm going to speak about myself first. I used to write a pro wrestling column back when I was in college, mostly covered ECW, WCW, and WWF at the time. And at the same time, I was also covering local federations. The biggest story I had was the mass transit slicing by New Jack, okay? I was actually there. All the Meltzers and all the Jim Cornettes and everyone else who has an opinion about that fucking thing, they didn't see it like I saw it, okay? I was feet away from the ring. So all these guys, including the wrestlers, the Blue Meanies and others that have spoken about this situation, they were in the back. They didn't have monitors. I saw this thing with my own fucking eyes, okay? Point is, on this side trail of a point, it's easy for someone who loves wrestling, like I did, probably like Bruce Mitchell does, like Meltzer does. Sometimes there's a little bit of an envy, to be honest, with the wrestlers. Like, you want to be the fucking wrestler, or in that case, I want to be the wrestler. I was even wrestling in local promotions. But would I want the fame, the attention, the money of being an ECW wrestler or WWF wrestler, or more to my point, a ring announcer or commentator? Yes. So it's hard to be objective when you actually have an envy for the profession. Now, did Bruce Mitchell ever dream of being a wrestler or dream of being a ring announcer or a commentator? I don't know. Now, that's a little joke, a little rib on Brucey there, Bruce Mitchell, because if you've been listening to his ad-free shows, you can read the comments on the app. People were really getting sick of Bruce Mitchell's his usage, his kind of weaving a sentence in and out. And I know that I do that on these rants, but when you're trying to read news and you're weaving in and out, it gets to be very annoying. He also had piss poor audio. It sounded like he was talking into a speakerphone from miles away from the recording device. His audio got cleaned up in the last couple of days, but in any event, his count was still high. He was getting a little bit better. And he would always make these kind of comments that I think I knew what he was saying, but he didn't give them context. And like Eric Bischoff says, context is king. Primarily about the ethnicity of like the New Day versus who are the other tag team champions there and fucking SmackDown tag team champions. God, I'm drunk. I'm not Private fucking Party. Now I feel bad because I can't remember the New Day and Montovius and what's his dick. So basically he would use expressions like the Survivor Series match that those two tag teams had. He would say things like the black match or the the African American match or the ethnic match, and he's referring to the New Day against their opponents at the Survivor Series. Not Private Party. I'm just blanking on the tag team's name, but you know who I'm talking about. The other tag team champions there. So basically, Bruce was racially aware, I'd call it. Now, what Bruce was not giving you the context of, folks, is things like Butch Reed versus Junkyard Dog, or Kamala versus Junkyard Dog, or say like Ernie Ladd versus Rocky Johnson. Historically in the past, namely the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, oftentimes promoters, and we can say bigoted wrestling promoters, or they thought their fans were bigoted, they would put, the two black guys against each other. Butch Reed versus Junkyard Dog would be, of course they'd have to wrestle each other. And so what Bruce is kind of saying in these things is he's making a callback reference to that era, which I think is lost on a lot of younger wrestling fans. Why would they think about that? Why would they know that? They don't think of things that way. I mean, they saw Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan, and that's a black guy versus a white guy at WrestleMania. So what's the problem? Well, Bruce didn't give context, didn't give historical context to when he was saying these things, the African-American match or the ethnic match, and it sounded really fucking bad, to be honest, by today's standard, because they don't have the context. Now we move forward, and I guess I'm hot topicing. Like I know it's a fucking pit of quicksand that I'm about to enter with even talking about this topic, but this whole thing with John passing away and Brody Lee, Luke Harper, and Bruce's article. Now, I did not read the exact article. What I saw online was quotations from the article, and what I heard on ad-free shows on the Bruce Mitchell Report, he glowingly, okay, I want to be honest, Bruce glowingly discussed Brody Lee's career, glowingly, and put this guy over and said he was really making an impact in AEW, winning the championship, beating Cody very quickly. And then just towards the end of his kind of Brody Lee, report, he got a little into some area on the ad-free shows that's a little bit off to me, but it basically speculating on the man's death, and sounded a little bit off. I took a mental note of it, but it wasn't the same content of what he put in the torch. Now, that's my interpretation. My interpretation is he said some things on the ad-free shows report after John's passing that were a little off kilter to me, a little like, what's going on here? And kind of speculating, I guess that's the key word. And basically speculating, but I don't think that what he said on that report on ad-free shows was anywhere near as bad or as speculative, which in this case is bad, on the Pro Wrestling Torch, which has now been removed. So unless somebody screenshotted the report, I don't know what the fuck it said. So what I think happens here, folks, is a wrestling reporter, Bruce Mitchell, 30 years with the torch. Bruce is not going to appreciate this if he sees my video. But I think Bruce let this wrestling bug get inside his system a little bit. Look, folks, I hate to fucking break it to you, or to JD from New York, my buddy Joe Cronin, who is a buddy of mine. These are podcast guys. I know it's different. We're not real fucking reporters, okay? First of all, the topic matter, pro wrestling, let's just fucking not be so goddamn serious about ourselves for a minute. I've tried to be serious when I talked about the WWE doing shows in Saudi Arabia with no women and no Sami Zayn, and guess what? The audience, meaning the wrestling community, the IWC, whatever the fuck you want to call yourselves, the wrestling community can't handle fucking facts and real stories. I discovered that. I already knew that. But I fucking learned that the hard way, that you try to talk serious things about McMahon's funding Trump or the fucking Saudi Arabian government dealing with the WWE. The wrestling fans don't want to discuss it. They don't want to hear it. It's above their fucking pay grade. They can't comprehend real issues in pro wrestling. Real life issues. So Bruce Mitchell, if you're seeing this, your key sin here was you forgot your audience. If you're writing for the New York Times or the Washington Post, maybe you would have been okay. Maybe. Okay, I'm putting a maybe in there. But you forgot your fucking audience. These are whoever the fuck they are, 25 to 55-year-old males. This is the escape for everybody. And everybody's sad and upset and depressed that Brody Lee, Luke Harper, has passed away at a young age. People are trying to get through this thing. His contemporaries, the peers, the boys, if you would, they want to grieve, and nobody wants to hear this speculative shit. So yes, Bruce, I get it. You consider yourself a real fucking reporter, fine. But you forgot your goddamn audience. And whether you want to admit it or not, you're in the entertainment business, okay? I'm sorry, but no one's going to get a Pulitzer for pro wrestling, and maybe somebody will fucking Google that someone got a goddamn Pulitzer for writing something about pro wrestling 50 years ago or 60, I don't know. But the point is, Bruce, you got ahead of yourself. You got your fucking head blown up on your own ass, and you got ahead of yourself. Now, I don't wish Bruce ill. I don't want Bruce hurting himself or doing anything destructive. The world's already collapsing upon him. He's lost his job at PW Torch. I don't know what's going to happen with fucking Conrad Thompson and ad-free shows. The tide is turning against Bruce. There was no fucking Bruce Mitchell update today either. Whatever the hell today was, Tuesday, the 29th, has come and gone. Now it's the 30th. So there was no update. Bruce, it was said that Bruce would not be doing an update on the 28th, and he didn't. Now the fucking 29th came and went, and no word from Conrad about Bruce Mitchell. So we don't know. So the point is this. I am trying to be lenient towards Bruce Mitchell because I don't want him to hurt himself. I don't want him to do anything drastic or get depressed. But I think you fucked up, Bruce, okay? Because you forgot who your audience is. The timing was horrible. And really to the core of this situation, and Brody Lee's, I hate to say it, his now widow, it's horrible to even say that, but she posted a big thing, which one of the guys from the Revival, FTR, retweeted. It wasn't by him, folks, it was by the widow. She wrote something, and she was basically saying that her husband was tested for COVID several times. He never had it. The whole speculative nature, if I didn't make this clear, of Bruce's original article apparently was making kind of insinuations that possibly it could have been COVID related, and that the family or AEW had some type of responsibility to be more forthright, if that's the word, with this information. It's in the fucking weeds, folks. Like, if you're a pro wrestling fan who just wants to watch John Cena or Roman Reigns or something, and you're getting this video somehow, this is so beyond where you're at as a wrestling fan. This is like internet deep fucking dive pro wrestling shit, when people are actually reading these goddamn what they call dirt sheets in pro wrestling. So this is pretty obscure shit. If you're not a wrestling fan, that's why I said watch something else on my fucking channel. But I know that I have two audiences now. I have the world at large audience, and I have the wrestling fans. So for the wrestling fans, let's continue. What do I think should happen? What do I think will happen? I don't know. I mean, I think it's a thing where, look, I remember commenting on a video, I think from the Wrestle Talk guys a couple of years ago, when Ollie or one of them was doing some fucking video, and he had a bunch of his wrestling action figures in the background, and he was getting a little stiff about something, and I wrote a comment, and someone else wrote a comment on YouTube, and they said, well, he's a journalist. And I said, the guy has action figures of the wrestlers in the background of his commentary here. That's not journalism. You know what I mean? Like, people covering politics don't walk around with an apartment full of George Bush action figures or Barack Obama action figures and say they're a journalist. So if you're a pro wrestling journalist, okay, you know what I mean? Who's the standard? Dave fucking Meltzer, who gives stars to people and goes gaga for Kenny Omega. If you ever saw that video. So I'm not claiming to be a real fucking journalist, and I'm not trying to say holier than thou shit on Bruce. I think Bruce, like I said, I think deep down he's a nice guy, but I think he got a little ahead of himself here. I think his timing was fucking horrible, and I think maybe, to be honest, having that deal with ad-free shows, maybe that got to his fucking head. I mean, maybe he's been in the shadows of Dave Meltzer for 30 years, and Wade Keller, and whatever the fuck, Brian Alvarez, and Bruce Mitchell felt like he was at the front of the line now. And he had carte blanche to fucking do whatever he wanted, and wanted to have some hot take on this thing. A man has passed a fucking way. It's not a joke. A man has died. A man that was well-received, well-liked. I never met the guy. I just liked his in-ring work, as both Luke Harper and Brody Lee. A lot of respect. And from what I've been reading, everyone respected this guy that got to know him. So I think Bruce fucked up. Now, I don't want anything, like I said, I don't want to repeat myself, but I'm not putting the 7 curses on Bruce Mitchell. I think he's a nice guy, but I think sometimes, folks, if you ever done this, if you ever fucked up, and rather than kind of seeing like, oh, I fucked up, you just keep digging yourself in and in and in. And I think, Bruce, you're doing that. I think Bruce is doing that. I think he's digging his little fucking, digging himself a deeper hole in this thing. And now people are wanting to disassociate with him. And I feel bad for Bruce. But Bruce, at some point, you have to kind of wake up and say, hey, maybe I'm being an insensitive fucking asshole here. Now, I think that some of these guys, no offense, but if you listen to Dave Meltzer, you start to wonder, is he, quote, on the spectrum, quote, a little Curb Your Enthusiasm reference? And I wonder sometimes, no offense to Bruce, but could these guys who think they're covering pro wrestling, or they are they on the fucking spectrum? Like, do they have a fucking mental block that they don't have reality in their system? You know what I mean? Because they think they're a journalist for this goddamn wrestling. Well, like I explored earlier, I tried that. It didn't work for me, with the fucking whole WWE Saudi Arabia thing. Seeing New Jack get his head sliced open, I realized what a bunch of shit this whole pro wrestling industry is. Paul Heyman lying, everything. Now I'm going to wrap this goddamn video. I want to be here all night, but I felt the need to speak about it. MikeMessier.com, Mike Messier YouTube channel. For the wrestling fans, watch Oxbaker, One of the Boys, Wrestling Son, Memories of My Parents' Divorce. Mike Messier, Bruce, you owe everyone an apology. And let's move on, MikeMessier.com.